welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has criticized the Trump administration, calling it unworthy of contact or cooperation with Tehran. He has also denied rumors that Iran had sent messages to Washington. Israeli authorities review a deadly incident in Jenin, West Bank, where IDF soldiers shot 2 men following surrender. Palestine condemned the killings as war crimes. Germany, Italy, France, and the United Kingdom urge Israel to follow international law and protect Palestinians in the West Bank. The ministers condemned rising settler violence and called for accountability and civilian protection. Syrian Justice Minister Wais met with a UN team of experts in Damascus to strengthen the rule of law measures and support systems for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. The talks followed by a separate meeting with Amnesty International focused on transitional justice documenting violations and expanding international assistance. Pope Leo, on his first overseas trip, has warned in Ankara that a third world war is being fought piecemeal as conflicts escalate and threaten humanity's future. Upon the hearing, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has praised the Pope's Palestinian stance and calls on peace, while also highlighting Pope's peace calls on Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that National Guard trooper Sarah Backstorm has died after a shooting near the White House. He has said that second soldier remains in critical condition and is fighting for his life. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Kyiv holds daily consultations with international partners to counter Russia's war. He adds that Ukrainian and U.S. delegations will meet again to advance frameworks for peace and security guarantees. The death toll from the high-rise apartment complex fire in Hong Kong has now risen to 94 people, with 76 people injured as rescuers launched full-scale operations across 7 burned buildings, as early investigations indicated the use of non-compliant, highly flammable materials. Now for this hour, we start with Iran. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has said that the Trump administration is not worthy of cooperation with the Islamic Republic. Speaking on the state-designated day honoring the Basij paramilitary force, Khamenei has rejected claims that Iran had contacted Washington, calling such rumors a pure lie. Khamenei has also praised Iran's public unity during the 12-day war with Israel in June, despite internal differences. He has asserted that Israel and the U.S. had failed to achieve any objectives in the conflict. Khamenei has also dismissed claims by former President Donald Trump that U.S. strikes had destroyed Iran's nuclear program, insisting the damage was minimal. Let's listen in.
شایعاتی درست میکنن که دولت ایران به واسطه فلان کشور پیغام برساده به آمریکا. دروغ محض که چنین چیزی حتما وجود نداشت. یه چنین دولتی در قرآن نیست که کسی دولتی مثل جمهوری اسلامی به دنبال ارتباط با او و همکاری با او.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Alison Nutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Alison, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how are we to see this Iranian leader, Ali Khamenei, is openly denying that he has sent any letter or any message to U.S., and also he rejects cooperating with U.S. It doesn't suit them?
Well, obviously they've got a great deal of hostility to the United States because of the strikes on Iran to eliminate their nuclear program in June. And there hasn't been any development in relations since then. So politically, there'll be absolutely no reason for him or his administration reaching out to Washington, whether that be directly, which even if it's being reported isn't being done directly, or through a regional ally which has relations with Washington, like Saudi Arabia, as has been reported. So I'm not sure whether he has or he hasn't. There may have been some low-level testing of the waters, but politically, particularly on this holiday, this special day for Iranians, he wants everyone to stand united. He acknowledges there are people who don't necessarily agree with his regime, but he says they must stand united. And he is proud, and he is saying, we have not reached out to the United States. There's still great disagreement about the results of those strikes. The US said it knocked out the nuclear abilities, whereas he says it was barely grazed, it was barely touched. I think independent reports say there was some harm done, but not as much as Donald Trump says was done. So I don't think politically it would put him in a very weak position to reach out to the United States. What for? This was a country that tried to bomb something they have been carefully creating, carefully developing its nuclear capabilities. So politically, he was right to say it would be beneath us to do this. Whether that is true is another matter. There might well have been some level of diplomacy going on, back channel diplomacy, not directly to Washington, I very much doubt that, but through Saudi Arabia. But the message he has chosen to give to his nation on this holiday, special day, is that it is beneath us to do this, and Iran will stand united.
Right. And what impact does Iran's emphasis on, public unity during this last conflict with Israel? How do you think this has on internal political dynamics? Do you think Ali Khamenei is carefully choosing his words to show the public or in Iran, and also he knows that internationally people will be listening and paying attention to his calls or his speech that he's given today?
Absolutely. When the Iranian leader makes a public statement, which is carried domestically in Iran and internationally, that message is designed for audiences both in Iran and outside Iran. So it's not just a message, an off-the-cuff remark. It's not a spontaneous comment he's making here. He's sending a very clear message. He's acknowledging, which I found quite interesting, that there may be some level of disunity at home in Iran, which is quite unusual for a country like Iran, which is not a democracy. So he's acknowledging that, but almost saying, let's just pull together, let's put on a united front. And we Iranians stick together, and we are beneath going to the United States. That is beneath us. So he is putting out a clear message. He doesn't speak that often publicly, and this is one occasion. And a leader that doesn't speak often publicly, you need to pay attention when he does speak, what he says and what's behind those words. And he's basically blanking Washington. We want nothing to do with you. We're very fine at home. Our country may not be perfect, but we are united. That's his message.
Right. And do you think in that message does he include or underlining that we don't even need to cooperate with US? Do you think did you hear the speech?
Sorry, I heard the speech, but I only heard it in Iranian. I didn't have it on my screen, so I didn't hear read the subtitles.
Right.
But they have pursued an isolationist path. They do want to destroy Israel. That's one of the reasons, that Washington has the issues it does with them. But Iran does have relations with other countries like Russia, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab countries for sure. And they are developing nuclear weapons, and they are what you call hardline. It's a hardline hardline Middle East state, that's for sure. And ever has been since they toppled the old regime in the 1970s and brought in Khamenei. And it's a very rigid regime and not a very flexible regime. And there's very, very, very little room for reform there until Khamenei finally passes.
Yes.
I can't see any change going on there. So in fact, this message is stern and strong as it is pretty much to be expected.
Yes, and Alison, lastly, maybe it's too early to say, but in your first answer, you did mention that there's no direct talks going on, but could be back channel talks that could be going on through Saudi Arabia. Do you think there is anything that can be done from both sides to de-escalate the situation?
I think because basically there are some countries in the world that are totally isolationist, like say North Korea, but even they're not totally isolationist. They've sent their soldiers to Ukraine to fight. They had talks when Donald Trump was first in office. No country actually wants to be totally isolationist because it's very detrimental. It's very harmful for the country because you need to talk to other countries. You need to do trade. You need to cooperate on various issues because we're all humans at the end of the day. So even a very nationalistic country like Iran and a very proud country, one thing is what they say, what they deliver, another thing is what they do. I'd be very surprised if talks aren't going on. And as I said at the beginning, they won't be directly to the United States, who they considered an enemy because of the strikes in June, and not only that, and also the US protection of Israel, which is the country they want to destroy. The talks will be going on with Saudi Arabia, which has a good relation with the Trump administration, and it has a good relation with Iran. So for sure, talks will be going on, how to improve relations, but not just how to, what areas, because there's always areas of common interest, whether it's fighting terrorism, whether it's something to do with nuclear, there are always areas where relations can be improved and there can be cooperation. So that's what I imagine, that the Iranian officials, and they will be skilled diplomats, that's what they'll be talking to Saudi Arabia, and that's also Saudi Arabia has a channel to the United States. But these things don't happen quickly, but they will be looking for common ground for sure.
With that, I would like to thank Alison Nuttler for always joining us and sharing that insight from Bucharest. Thank you very much. Now we stay in the region. Israeli authorities are reviewing an incident in Jenin in the occupied West Bank in which IDF soldiers shot 2 people following a surrender procedure. The Palestinian Authority confirmed their deaths, with the West Bank's General Authority for Civil Affairs identifying the men as 26-year-old Al-Muntasir Mahmoud Qassem Abdullah and 37-year-old Yusuf Ali Yusuf Asasa. Palestine has also condemned the deadly shooting as a full-fledged war crime and a flagrant violation of all international laws, conventions and norms and humanitarian values. Meanwhile, Israel's far-right security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has given his full backing to the officers involved, adding that terrorists must die. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Rohan Gunaratne. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Now, Professor, thank you for joining us again. We don't know what exactly was the cause of these 2 Palestinians walking towards Israeli soldiers. But how should international law be applied and enforced in situations where lethal force is used after reported surrender, in this case particularly towards Israel and the Gazans who were shot?
Asuma, it's very good to see you.
Thank you.
Let me share with you that in the West Bank, there has been escalation in tensions. It's largely driven by the situation in Gaza, so it has spilled over to the West Bank. And there has been more incidents in the West Bank most recently, but these are very recent developments. We have seen some of the Hamas ideology has also come to the West Bank. But to specifically respond to your question, what we are seeing is that it was a tragic death because these 2 individuals wanted to surrender to the Israelis. They didn't want a confrontation. Of course, there was a shooting. So what we have seen most recently is that the Israeli troops have become more suspicious of such activities because in the past, there has been some incidents where people wanted to surrender and then, of course, they opened fire. So I believe that this is a very tragic incident, and this incident will certainly be investigated because there's a lot of international focus and spotlight on this issue. The Israelis are fighting a very difficult war, a very difficult battle after the October 2023 attacks where 1,200 Israelis and foreign nationals were killed, and another 251 were kidnapped by Hamas and its allied groups. But at the same time, it is so important for Israel to be more restrained when it deals with the civilian population, because if they lose support from the Palestinian people, there will be more attacks and there will be more violence and there will be more extremism.
And is there any political implications of this opposing narratives? You know, the Palestinian Authority calling the incident a war crime, while Israeli minister like Ben-Gvir defended the shooters.
The Palestinian Authority itself is not accepted by Israel as a credible partner. In fact, there are many efforts by the international community to bring the Palestinian Authority as the new governing body of Gaza. Israel doesn't accept it because the Palestinian Authority itself does not recognize Israel as a state. So what we are seeing is that there is currently a debate between these powers, the PA and the Israeli Authority. Certainly both their claims will be evaluated by international bodies, and they may very well come to a conclusion as to what happened. But what is key and what is central is, as there is now a shift towards phase 2 in Gaza, and there is interest for the Palestinian Authority also to play a role, although Israel is opposed to it, that such conflicts do not impact on the greater plans to build stability and security both of Gaza and of the West Bank.
Yes, with that, I would like to thank Professor Gunratna for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Europe, Germany, Italy, France, and the United Kingdom urge Israel to follow international law and protect Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. In a joint statement, the four foreign ministers have condemned the sharp rise in settler violence and called on Israel to take immediate steps to restore stability, hold perpetrators accountable, and safeguard civilians. The ministers warn against annexation and settlement expansion, highlighting the approval of the E1 project and thousands of new settlement units this year as an unprecedented escalation that must be reversed. They've also criticized Israel's withholding of Palestinian tax revenues and demand their release, emphasizing the need to support public services and prevent further economic decline. Reaffirming their commitment to a two-state solution, the ministers have stressed that it remains the only path to a just and lasting peace. They urge all parties to exercise restraint and take concrete measures to de-escalate tensions in the region. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Rohan Gunratna. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, Professor, do you think that these calls, or not just from these European nations, but also from regions across the world, have been continually calling for a two-state solution? But do you think this is realistically feasible at this time?
Two-state solution would have been acceptable before October 2023 attacks. There were many Israelis who were considering it. There was a huge community in Israel that wanted a two-state solution. But after October 2023 attacks, no sensible Israeli will want and will agree to a two-state solution, because if there is a build-up of anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish sentiments, either in West Bank or in Gaza, there will be no security for Israel. So Israel does not want to give a two-state solution. But it is an idealistic view and a vision of a very small number of Israelis and Jews. And of course, it is a concept that is being promoted by many Europeans and European governments, the Canadians, the Australians, New Zealanders. They want a two-state solution. But personally, I believe that it's a question of time that there will be a two-state solution, but not at the moment. Until the threat in Gaza is dismantled and Hamas is eliminated, there will be no two-state solution. Who wants to have next to its own land a terrorist group that has killed 1,200 people, taken 250 people as hostages, and they still praise it, they still love it. In fact, they call it the Al-Aqsa flood, and they are still, there's no regret, no remorse on the part of either the Palestinians or of Hamas that they have made a fatal mistake. The day they accept this is a horrible attack, this is a massacre, and this should not have happened, that is the day the two-state solution is created. So this will need a lot of understanding, a lot of dialogue between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's too premature for anyone to ask for a two-state solution at this point because the Israelis are not ready for it.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Rohan Gunaratna for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to Syria. Syria has reported that 9 people were killed by Israeli strikes in the southern village of Beit Jin amid a clash between the locals and IDF troops. Meanwhile, IDF has said that 6 IDF troops were wounded, including 3 in serious condition after coming under fire during an arrest operation in southern Syria. The IDF also said that the soldiers of the 55th Reserve Paratroopers Brigade set out to detain members of the Al-Jama'a al-Islamiyya terror organization following an intelligence information collected in recent weeks, indicating that they were operating in the Syrian village of Beit Jin and worked to advance attacks on Israel. Now we move on to Turkey. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has praised Pope Leo's position on the Palestinian issue following a meeting in Ankara. Erdogan has commended the Pope and his predecessor for their support of Palestine and called his first overseas visit as Catholic leader a hopeful step for humanity in these times of tension. Erdogan also highlighted the Pope's calls for peace and diplomacy over the Ukraine war, noting their significance. Turkey has been a strong critic of Israel's action in Gaza, and Erdogan has also expressed appreciation for the Pope's messages on family values. Let's listen into what the Turkish president has shared.
Kıymetli misafirimizin ziyareti bölgesel ve küresel olaylar bağlamında son derece kritik bir zamana tekabül ediyor. İnsanlığın yön arayışının hızlandığı, küresel düzeyde belirsizliklerin arttığı, Asya'dan Afrika'ya, Latin Amerika'dan Doğu Avrupa'ya gerilimlerin tırmandığı bir dönemde gerçekleşen ziyaretin tüm insanlık için hayırlara vesile olmasını ümit ve arzu ediyorum. Saygıdeğer misafirimiz ve seleflerinin özellikle Filistin meselesine yönelik dirayetli duruşlarını daima takdirle karşıladığımızın bir...
And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.